Hello
Hello there.
there. Welcome back to another episode 71 to be specific, of Star Wars in a Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. Today, we are going over two very, very unusual episodes, The Deserted Part 1 and 2. As always, I'm Jacob,
I'm Eli.
and let's talk some Star Wars.
Yes, let's talk some deserted. That's what our episodes are. By the way, did
Yeah.
you realize you said deserted?
Did I say deserted?
Yeah.
Go, should I redo that? Here,
No, no, no. It's good. It's good. It's good. I want to keep that in there, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, sure.
My
Yeah.
favorite part is how you said it, like absolutely just going ahead with it, like nothing was
I
wrong.
no, I completely just misspoke and didn't even notice. But no, we were looking at The Disappeared Part 1 and 2. Very interesting, very unorthodox
Yeah.
episodes.
But first, as Jacob pointed out to me, because of course, as soon as he mishears a word, I entirely forget what we do at the start of these episodes when a new show releases. So both of us apparently are a little off kilter today, but we're good. Everything's good. Let's talk about not one, but two episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. We did not get to talk about Chapter 4 when Alice and Laura were here because we wanted to just focus on them and how great they were. But let's talk about both Chapter 4, which is The Gathering Storm, and Chapter 5. Sorry, The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 9, Return of the Mandalorian.
Yes.
Um, uh,
You want to start us
so,
off talking about Chapter 4?
yeah, Chapter 4 details a lot of, um, Boba's relationship with Fennec Shand, and how she has come to help him along the way with all of his exploits. She is repaired by Boba, who salvages her from the desert after the Mandalorian and Toro Calican rescue her for dead. She's repaired by Thundercat, which not enough Star Wars podcasts are talking about this. I'm a musician myself, and I've been getting into a lot of neo soul music these days, and I love Thundercat, and I love his music. And I watched the scene. I'm like, oh, that's a weird guy. I recognize him. I totally recognize him. And then somebody was like online, oh, it's Thundercat. I'm like, what? And we also see the recruiting of Black Chrysanthemum to the side of Boba Fett and his empire. But Boba has a Godfather type scene with all of the different captains who were under Jabba when he was ruling Tatooine. And he says he's going to need help from a different ally. He's going to need to bring some more muscle in. And then we hear a very familiar musical theme playing that we haven't heard in about a year. And that's the theme of The Mandalorian. And everyone was wondering for a week, are we going to see The Mandalorian? Is The Mandalorian going to appear in the next episode? And now we know not only is the answer yes, but it's the only thing we're going to see in that episode.
And a little bit of Fennec Shand.
Yeah, just a
But it's
little.
all just Din Djarin. It's all just
Yeah, it's all
Mando.
just Dinjin. But before we get to that, what are your thoughts on The Gathering Storm?
As an episode, it wasn't my favorite. I certainly liked it better than Chapter 3, but I thought it suffered from some of the same problems where it felt a little bit too self-indulgent, very, very kind of meandering to me. Even though it hit some important points, I just felt like it wasn't quite as taut or focused as I would have liked, as were episodes 1 and 2, and also episode 5. But overall, no huge complaints. I liked seeing how Fennec Shand and Boba get together, even if I thought it was a little bit strange that Fennec had almost no reaction to waking up with cyborg guts all of a sudden. Yeah, overall, I thought it was kind of I thought it was kind of an averaging out of some of what I really liked about the first two episodes and some of what I didn't so much like about the third episode.
Yeah, my review, I think maybe is a little bit more positive. I really liked I love everything they did with Kersantin and with his character in the episode. I love this like approach that we're getting to the finale. Of course there were some things that I was not thrilled about. I think the Jabba's palace sequence where they go get the fire spaceship back is a bit too long, frankly. Even though I do like the Grievous chef droid.
Oh yeah, I love the chef droid part. There were a lot of cool moments in this
Yeah,
episode that I really liked. So I'm not trying to be overly harsh on it. I just
yeah,
didn't think it was as good
um,
as it could have been.
yeah. I understand that. You want to get on to what we thought about Chapter 5, Return of the Mandalorian?
Yes, chapter 5, because I found chapter 5 very, very exciting. It totally surprised me. It blew my mind in a lot of different ways. So I
Interesting.
was very
So
happy. I was very happy with chapter 5.
so I gotta say, I'm not gonna lie to you. I watched Chapter 5 for the first time, I think a little bit earlier than you did, and I said to myself right after I came out of that, Jacob's gonna hate this.
Really? What
Yeah,
made you think
I
that?
thought you would. Well, so we gotta address the elephant in the room with this episode, which has come up a lot on the internet and discourse for this episode.
Hmm.
We have a Boba Fett episode without Boba Fett in the episode.
Yeah. I thought that was a bit weird, but quite frankly, I didn't care because to me it was such a fun episode and I had such a good time watching it that
Yeah,
I honestly didn't care.
yeah. I would also add that thematically it still fits with the Book of Boba Fett, even if Boba is not in the episode himself. Which is what a lot of people have pointed out. I made a Twitter thread on this a few days ago because I've just been very annoyed of people like being too quick. I'm not saying this about you, Jacob. Absolutely not. But about people being a little too quick to judge Book of Boba Fett.
But I think that what people are saying is that it also has to be able to stand on it. Each episode has to be able to stand on its own two legs in the meantime. And I think the problem is that some of these episodes don't necessarily don't necessarily
Stand on their own.
they don't really come across so well without without more context. And I think that it's not necessarily unfair to critique that if Disney and if the creators are making the choice to say, hey, we're going to release these one at a time. Well, if they're being released one at a time, then they can be judged one at a time. And I think it's fine if someone is saying that the show doesn't know what it wants to be yet, because I think that it is fair to say that the show, whether you think it's good, whether you think it's bad, I think a lot of people of both opinions, although it is still a subjective matter, would agree that it is a little bit all over the place. So I don't think that it's necessarily an indictment of the show so much as it is just making an observation saying this doesn't feel quite as it should.
I agree with you on some points. I disagree with you on other points. I agree that the weekly format for this was ultimately not a great idea. I'm not exactly sure if I agree about the whole standing on its two legs things, only because if this were The Mandalorian, I would 100% agree with you, because The Mandalorian is an episodic show. They go do a new adventure every single episode. The Book of Boba Fett, and we didn't know this, that's the other thing, we didn't know this, is not that show. It's what we call, a serialized show.
Yeah.
It builds constantly on one story, or we think one story, and reveals, as you say, peels back the layers on the story every single week. I agree with you that I don't think that lends well to episodic I agree that not episodic. I agree that the serialized version doesn't lend itself well to weekly releases, but I don't think that we should be judging something that is clearly meant to fit together on its ability to stand alone.
I get what you're saying, but at the same time, I think it seems like a bit of a poor excuse to me to wave away all possibilities that, maybe this show missed the mark a little bit in terms of the consistency between episodes, because there are so many serialized shows both in and out of Star Wars that have come out bit by bit, and I think that the expectation of having a show drop all at once obviously is a bit newer. That I don't necessarily think it's so crazy to expect it to expect the episodes to have some consistency. So I would disagree with you on that one.
I will also just clarify one of my points. Again, in my tweet thread that I did, I said specifically, I'm not saying don't judge it at all. I'm saying I find it interesting and I find it troubling that people are willing to make final judgments based on something that isn't finished yet.
Well, if you're, I'm sorry, but I completely fail to see how saying it doesn't know what show it wants to be. I fail to see how that's a final judgment unless I fail to see how that's a final judgment unless we're saying that it's a final judgment, because the show is still coming out, and that's not a statement that doesn't leave room for progress and new developments as the show continues. So I would disagree with you on that point as well. But I understand where you're coming from. Like I feel like people have a tendency to really want everything to be black and white. I see a lot of, oh, this show sucks, Disney's ruining Star Wars, or oh, if you don't like this show, you're spoiled and you can't handle that it's different. So like
Yeah.
I agree. I feel like people just need to kind of take it as it comes and wait. And I think people are kind of doing themselves a disservice. And I think what you've identified is that we'd be doing ourselves a disservice if we make big sweeping judgments at this stage of the game. That's my
I
feeling.
I understand where you're coming. I think like if people were saying, "Oh, it's bad so far," like that's an opinion and that I don't agree with. But like, it's a little different than it doesn't know what show it wants to be, in my opinion, just because it does know what show it wants to be. You know why? Because they've already finished filming. They've already finished writing it. They've already finished filming it. Like, just because we haven't seen what show it wants to be doesn't mean it doesn't know.
Okay.
That's my main problem with that specific argument, is that just because we don't see something doesn't mean it's not there.
I mean, I
Like,
think that's kind of, to me, that seems like a little bit of an ambiguation of what the person probably meant, which is just as the show is developing. Because for as viewers, for all intents and purposes, it is unfolding in front of our very eyes. And so to say that, I think it doesn't necessarily mean in a literal sense of accusing people of making it up as they go. I think it's just saying, hey, these episodes are inconsistent. The show hasn't necessarily found its tone yet, at least from what's been released.
that's fair.
Yeah. But anyway,
Again, I'm just yeah.
yeah.
But
Anyway,
what? Sorry, let's get on to the actual episode.
yeah. More about let's I don't know. Is there anything more you want to say about part five? I feel like
I
we
loved
lost.
it.
We got lost. I
Um,
loved it as well. There were a lot of there were a lot of moments that just made me go wow in a way that I haven't in a minute watching Star Wars. That flight test scene, that was really well done. That was absolutely thrilling. As was the vast majority of this episode.
yeah, I can confidently say now that my favorite of the live action TV directors is Bryce Dallas Howard because of this episode, basically.
What else has Howard
I'm
directed?
not I'm not saying because this episode came out she's the best. I'm saying like I was already starting to come to that conclusion, and this one sealed the deal. She
Yeah.
did Sanctuary, the Sorgan episode for The Mandalorian. She did The Heiress, the Bo-Katan of The Mandalorian, and then she did this. All of which
That's a
are
strong lineup, yeah.
extremely strong episodes in my opinion, I think she deserves. We got a leak. I know a few days ago that she apparently is also on the directing staff for The Mandalorian season 3. So that's good because I've loved everything that she's directed here. That N1, I remember there were some rumors that The Mandalorian was going to be flying an N1 in season 3. I'm like, that's ridiculous. They're never going to do that.
Yeah,
And then they
it was
did
a cool moment, yeah.
Yeah.
To me, I can't quite put my finger on it, but this episode, in terms of the pacing, in terms of just how it played itself out, this episode really felt like it had its ducks in a row in a way that some of the other Book of Boba episodes haven't. It had that taut feeling of no wasted air, no wasted time. That's what it felt like to me. And I think that some of the other Book of Boba episodes have gotten a little bit bogged down, maybe because they're focusing more on, the charisma of the characters and kind of focusing on the star power of the characters. But this episode, I really appreciated how focused it felt.
Yeah, I think also one of the strengths of this episode is, and I'm not saying that Boba and Fennec and all of their compatriots, the Swoop Gang and Kirsan and all those people, I'm not saying they're not engaging. They are. But there was a small part of me, and I'm sure there was a small part of everybody. Again, don't want to say anything. But I was sad that we weren't going to get any more Din until a year from now.
Yeah, me too.
I had grown to love this character, and I had grown to really appreciate where his story was going. So there was this very, it felt almost like home. It was like a familiar feeling when we saw Din again. I'm like, oh, this is so nice. We get Din again. Not that I don't like Boba. I do. I love this show. And I love seeing Boba absolutely just go nuts and do the Boba Fett things. But Boba, the first time I really felt like he was a cool character was in the tragedy. And we've spent now, the equivalent of 4 episodes, 5 episodes with him? Din we spent 2 seasons with. And Fennec we've spent, a few episodes in season 1, 1 episode in season 1, 2 episodes in season 2, and then, a few episodes in the Bad Batch. And I love her, but, again, we just haven't spent that much time with these characters. But to bring Din back in, we've spent so much time with him, and we're so invested in him, that it almost seems natural, as if that's the way to go.
It really, really made me curious and excited for what comes next. Why have they dedicated an entire episode in the Book of Boba Fett to just talk about Din without even having Mando? What is this leading us up to? What is the payoff going to be? So I'm very excited. I'm very excited for this upcoming Wednesday to see see what pans out.
I'm very excited as well. I've heard a lot of people talking about the similarities between Din and Boba. They've both been rejected out of the lives that they were most comfortable with. Boba as a bounty hunter and Din as a Mandalorian. And they're kind of having to forge new identities for themselves. Boba as a crime lord, Din as we're still figuring that one out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've noticed a lot of people's interesting ideas on this. I'm very excited for where this is gonna go. But let's talk about the Clone Wars though. Let's talk about the Clone Wars. Let's talk about the Disappeared, parts 1 and 2. And I have an idea. Jacob?
Mm-hmm.
Because these are named parts 1 and 2, do you want me to just summarize them the entire way?
Yeah, let's just do it. I feel like, I don't know.
in the disappeared, Jar Jar Binks and Jedi Master Mace Windu are summoned to the planet of Bardata, ruled by the Dagoyan Council of Mystics that rule over the planet and basically are passive in they're passive lookers, viewers into the Force. And the Dagoyan Council has been disappearing. One by one, they've been disappearing. And nobody knows what to do. And the queen of the planet, Queen Julia, who we found out used to be a lover of Jar Jar in some capacity.
Still is, it would seem to me, judging by these
Yeah.
episodes.
Summons Jar Jar to the planet. Jar Jar brings Mace Windu along because nobody trusts Jar Jar to solve this on his own. And while Jar Jar and Julia are having a private meeting, Mace Windu summons Jar Jar outside, and then when they come back in, the queen is gone. The rest of the Bardatans freak out because if she's gone for too long, 3 standard rotations, they say, they have a prophecy that a darkness will spread across the stars, it will be irreversible, it'll be very bad. So Jar Jar and Mace Windu go to an ancient temple to try and see if they can try and find who kidnapped Queen Julia and what their plans are for her. Jar Jar actually gets kidnapped himself by the main culprits of this, a cult called the Frangawl cult, whose goal is to sacrifice Julia and use her life essence to do something. They don't know what yet. And then Mace Windu gave Jar Jar a comic before. Jar Jar calms Windu. Windu goes and rescues him from the Frangawl cult right before they sacrifice his essence. In part 2, they track the ship that takes Queen Julia to a nearby moon, and they hurry through the marketplace, defeating cultists and defeating these stone guardians along the way to try and rescue Queen Julia. We eventually learn that Julia's life essence is going to be given to who's called the Great Mother, or as we know her, Mother Talzin, who wants more power. And so there's going to be this ritual with the sun, and it's going to suck out her life essence and give it to Talzin. Luckily, Jar Jar and Mace Windu arrive in time to save the day. Mace Windu duels Mother Talzin, but eventually Jar Jar and Julia make a cultist stand in the ritual space. The sacrifice goes wrong. They knock over the globe of life essence. Talzin disappears into the mists, and the rescue is complete. Mace Windu, Julia, and Jar Jar ride off into the sunset. Fortune cookie is, without darkness, there cannot be light, for the part 1.
What do you make of this one, Eli? Because this one, to me, I don't know. I didn't have a lot to say about it, especially given this arc. It is a little bit on the goofier side. So I'm going to be honest. I was a little bit stoned by this one. It felt like a little bit of a truism. Like, yeah, you can say that about
this one's really strange for me. I like the second one much better than the first one. But, I was thinking about the balance of the Force and, all the stuff we talked about at Mortis. And I actually literally said in my notes, I'm like, I don't know how this fits into this episode. I think it's maybe because of the growing darkness, Mace Windu and Jar Jar get their chance to be heroic, which is cool, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a wider sense, without darkness, there cannot be light. I think in a wider sense, this kind of just references the perennial struggle of the galaxy, of the light side and the dark, how the heroes, our heroes, the Jedi, Mace Windu, Jar Jar Binks, always have to be ready and willing to fight and to sacrifice for the balance of the Force, for the light side, whether that be the Jedi, whether that be Bardonan mysticism. I think the best my best guess is kind of just you got to stay ready because it's never truly over.
Yeah,
Because there has to be
absolutely.
darkness for there to be light, is what they're saying.
Absolutely. No one's ever really gone.
Yeah, same vibe. Definitely same vibe.
Yeah. Uh, so, I mean, let's get into this. Um, you know, I know you are a little turned off to episodes like these because you find the goofy episodes more unappealing to you. Is that correct? I don't want to put my words in your mouth.
I I don't necessarily think it's the goofy episodes. Obviously I found things that even though you liked it more, I found a lot to love in our rewatch of A Sunny Day in the Void. But I think it's episodes like this where it's not necessarily that they're bad. I don't think these are bad episodes. Say what you want about Jar Jar Binks, but I found a lot to enjoy in these episodes. They are, I would call them head scratcher episodes. They're like, oh, this is the final for now. Like, oh, this is the Lost Missions, the final season of the Clone Wars until season 7. This is the final the final what's the word I'm looking for? This is the final
Season.
build up, I guess, the final build up to Order 66. This is where it all comes down to the line. The darkness is about to swallow up the galaxy, and here we are showing Jar Jar Binks riding backwards on a Star Wars ostrich to save his former girlfriend from people wearing masks. So I don't mean that to be a criticism of the episode. I think that it is, like I said, I think the best way to describe it is just in the context of the show at the time, and in the context of the Clone Wars really at any time. This is one of those episodes. It's like the episode, I can't remember what it's called. Maybe it's called Mercy Mission, one of those episodes where R2 and C3PO get sucked underground and they have a whole series of
Yeah.
misadventures on the planet of tiny people. Like, it's episodes like that where you're just like, huh, that's interesting. I wonder what made them decide to go ahead with that. And I do think that this is a much better arc than that arc. So perhaps the comparison
I
isn't fair.
I was I was going to say I like this much better than Mercy Mission.
Yeah.
Um,
But that is all to say, that is all just to say that even though I even though I find this to be a bit of a confusing choice for them to to give this story the final nod in season 6, that is not a criticism of it. That is just to
it's a confusion of yours.
yeah, it's just a confusion of mine a little bit.
So, Jacob, I want to ask you something.
All
Have
right,
you ever seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom?
I have not.
You should totally see it. I understand there's some racist stuff in it with certain Indian stereotypes, which is not very good. But it's awesome. It's a great movie, and I love it so much. This is the Star Wars version of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom.
Hmm.
And it's my favorite Jones movie too. And I don't know what it is that I just love about this arc so much. But it's kind of what you said, the galaxy's going into darkness. We got the Order 66 arc. We have Anakin and Padme's relationship deteriorating. We're gonna see Yoda and everybody questioning what this is all for. And Jar Jar still has time to save his girlfriend from a cult.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly how I feel about it. But I do think that there is a lot of cool stuff in this episode.
No,
I
I,
think
I
it's
mean that as a good thing.
yeah, yeah.
I mean that as a
Like it's very cool to be able to see Force users who tap into the Force not just as a non-Jedi and a non-Sith, but they're experiencing the Force and interacting with it in a completely different way. Like the Night Sisters, I think that is I think that is
Yeah.
something that's really cool.
It's funny, even if you remove Talzin from the picture, my mind automatically jumped to the Night Sisters because it seems like the Dagoyan Masters are the inverse of the Night Sisters in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I would agree. They
Um,
are very, very passive. As you said, they're observers of the Force almost.
yeah, and Night Sisters say they're passive, and I know they are technically passive, but like, look at all their appearances in the shows and tell me they're passive.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and yeah, it's So here's what I want to know. Actually, here I want to know your thoughts about this.
Eh,
Do the Goyan Masters survive into the era of the Empire?
I doubt it. I think
Really?
they're one of those things that the Empire just would decide. I think the Emperor or someone in those early years of the Emperor in those early years of the Empire, it's one of those things that he would just, with a wave of his hand, decide, nah, just get rid of them. They might cause trouble down the line. Just get rid of them. Or I could see the Emperor honestly trying to maybe trying to maybe gosh, convert them to the dark side, try and make them into kind of dark side evil force using fortune tellers, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. I actually thought about that in my notes, and for me, I thought Sidious wouldn't care enough. It'd be like, oh, a bunch of light side like future seers who are not
Yeah,
going to attack me at any time.
yeah. So I
Okay,
mean,
cool.
yeah. I don't
I
know.
mean,
I definitely could
yeah.
see it going both ways. But let's jump in here. What's the angle you want to take? How do you want to crack open this episode, Eli? Since this is the kind of episodes that I feel like you really go for. So I want to give you the floor.
Yeah, I want to talk about Mace Windu. This episode gave me this arc as a whole gave me a little bit of a new look at Mace Windu. Now, if we recall, those of you who've listened to In a Galaxy before know that I'm not a huge fan of the Jedi Master. But I'm not gonna lie, this episode made me gain some sympathy for him.
Interesting. How come? I definitely. I
Because
mean, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
because it's one of those things where, you know, this is one of the only arcs, one of the only pieces of Star Wars content that I really can think of off the top of my head that suggests to us that Mace Windu is capable of change. It's
Yeah.
one of his greatest weaknesses. He is one of those people who knows what they believe and is so steadfast in their belief that it's very hard to change what they believe in.
Yeah. He's
And
definitely a very rigid person, even for the Jedi.
yeah, and that can be good in some ways, but it can also be incredibly damaging in other ways, and we see a lot of that. I'm thinking, you are on this council. We do not grant you the rank of master. I'm sorry, citizen. These matters are beyond your concern.
Yeah.
Um,
He definitely really just wants to play by the book. So it's
yeah,
interesting that he goes out of that here.
it is, and um, he's placed with Jar Jar, who's a
Yeah.
walking, talking version of Murphy's Law. When you're
Yeah.
with Jar Jar, anything that can go wrong will. And at the beginning of the first episode, he's just like, why did I do this?
Yeah. Yeah. He really changes a lot, at least in
Yeah,
his approach to Jar Jar and his respect for Jar Jar.
yeah,
I think what's interesting, this is going to jump forward in the episode a little bit, but Jar Jar actually even tells off Mace Windu, and Mace Windu kind of gets humbled when he, rushes in, busts into the chambers of Jar Jar and the Queen, saying, "Yo, I have to hear what's going on." When the Queen was about to tell Jar Jar the secret, which would have
what was
saved him so
going
much
on?
trouble. And then
Yeah.
Jar Jar and Mace Windu is like, "What are you doing? Like this is you're messing up the mission. Like we got to do this my way." And Jar Jar is saying, "No, dude, I'm the only reason there is any mission." So he kind
Yeah.
of tells Mace Windu what's what, and I find that very interesting. And it's a humbling moment because Mace thinks that Jar Jar will mess shit up, but in the end, he is the Jar Jar. He is the Jar Jar in
That's
that moment.
that is very good. I love that. I do like that. That's a very good observation. Um, yeah, it's Mace Windu out of his element, which I really like to see. And there's that final line of the episode that I want to point out. He goes in part one. He goes in the final line is Jar Jar. Maybe it's this place, but you're starting to make sense to me.
Yeah, that was a big
That's
moment, I
growth
thought.
right there. That's growth right there. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine Mace Windu telling Jar Jar Binks of all people that he makes sense?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Exactly.
one of those things where you can't. That's what I love about this show and what I love about specifically this arc. If you had told me half of these things that happened in this arc, I would have said that sounded like the worst two episodes of Star Wars: The Clone Wars that would have ever existed.
I would be right there with you.
But you watch it and it works. It just makes sense.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. And for me, what I noticed as well is that why does it feel like some of the goofiest episodes of the Clone Wars have some of the most remarkable visuals? Because I thought, I mean, obviously we're in Endgame Clone Wars. The animation has been upgraded
Skyrocketed.
substantially since the beginning of the
Yeah.
show. But these two episodes, man, they are beautiful. They're
They look
absolutely
good.
beautiful. The
The
attention to
marketplace looks
detail,
really great.
yeah, especially in the second episode, with the green, kind of the green tint over everything, the night market. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it's
Everything
all
looks great.
beautiful. It's all beautiful.
Yeah. And
So,
and I'll say this to you too. This is the larger point that I was going to make later, but I might as well just make it now. This is, everybody talks about what your Star Wars is, you know what I mean?
yeah,
The Disappeared is quintessentially some of my Star Wars. It's some of the Star Wars that works the best for me. I know a lot of people love their dark stuff, their Empires, their Last Jedis, their Rogue Ones, their, Ahsoka Trial Arc. I know that's what draws a lot of people. And that's fine. If that's your thing, go with it. I'm happy for you. My thing is the lighter but like very adventurous stuff. I think that's why I love Rise of Skywalker a lot. There's a lot of that in Jedi. There's a lot of that in both seasons of Resistance. There's a lot of that in this. There's a lot of that in the next arc, the Yoda and the Force arc. And I don't know what it is. Like World Between Worlds, I also put down. Jedi Fallen Order has a lot of that
yeah.
adventurous stuff.
I think a
That
lot of the
just
things, I think some of them are tied together by what I think of as the George Lucas fever dream factor. They all
yeah,
have a little bit of that feeling of George Lucas. He went to the dentist. He got some teeth pulled. He's coming back. He's still very high, and he goes into the writer's room. He goes into Skywalker Ranch. He goes in the writer's room, and he says, "This is what we're gonna do, people. Listen up." And then he just starts talking, and everyone else who's on his payroll just has to write it down.
just
And then he
goes
says,
with
"Okay,
it.
turn it into a fully fledged product and put that on the airwaves. Do it now."
Yeah,
That's what some of these feel like.
it's
To
like
certain degrees. This one definitely higher up on that scale, I would have to say.
yeah, it's like okay. Here's what we gotta do. Okay, what if we have a bounty hunter who's the same species as Saisi Teen, and he's voiced by Joe Manganiello in a show about pilots. And everybody's like, what the hell are you talking about? That's an actual 2-part episode in the second season of Resistance. Also, his name is Axe to Grin, as an axe to grind. How is that not incredible?
Some of the things. So I think in Legend, both in Legends and canon, I think one of Star Wars' strengths is its sheer breadth that just allows it to try out so many different things.
Yeah,
And
actually,
more often
speaking
than
this,
not, they turn out pretty cool, I think.
yeah, that it's something that Alex Damon from Star Wars Explained brings up. He goes, I love when Star Wars swings for the fences, even if it misses. I love when it tries, and I
Yeah.
agree with that wholeheartedly. When it just does things and it is unafraid to do them, that's when I think Star Wars is the most fun. Also, by the way, I want to point out to you, top 5 Star Wars name here, the Frangawl cult.
Yes, the Frangawl cult.
You just swallowed like a bug or something. The Frangawl cult.
Yeah.
It's so great.
Yeah.
I love
Speaking
it so
of the
much.
Frangawl cult, I want to talk about the cave scene because we get a classic Star Wars meme, Jar Jar saying, "Oh no,
Misa
Misa
disappearing.
disappearing."
I forgot that was a meme, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the cave scene, I thought it was sick. The
Wait, I just
action
realized something.
was
Did the cave scene predict Infinity War?
What do you mean?
Because of the what is it, the snap at the end. Like there was very similar it was
Oh.
very similar visually, the snap in Infinity War and Jar Jar disappearing when they threw the thing at him.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you never know.
I just thought about Master and Mace. Misa no feel so good.
Oh, jeez. Yeah. Yeah, I know, but amazing visuals in the cave scene. The essence stealing ritual. Now, I knew going into this that it was gonna be Talzin who was behind all this. But I mean, that should tip you off right there. The
Oh,
bright
yeah.
green color, like that is classic Night Sister. That is absolutely classic Night Sister, I think.
That ritual with Jar Jar and is and I'm saying this. I'm not sure if you looked at the episode guide. If you did, great. If you didn't, that's fine too. I'm 100% telling you that the ritual scene from the first one, especially the first one, is right out of Temple of Doom. There's a very similar sequence about an hour into Temple of Doom, where they do this thing that's really weird. Okay, this is gonna sound really weird, but they do this. The shaman of the tribe, the barbaric tribe in Temple of Doom, does this thing where he reaches into somebody and pulls out their heart.
Wow.
This is actually an Indiana Jones movie, and he can just reach inside somebody and pull out their heart.
Crazy.
It's
Absolutely
really
crazy.
weird. It's so funny.
Yeah, I mean, this episode definitely seems like it was intended to show some love to Indiana Jones. Obviously, the riding
Yeah.
into the sunset at the very end of the second episode.
That's straight out of Last Crusade. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, yeah, I really like this first episode. Cool at the end, Mace Windu, he shows some respect and appreciation for Jar Jar, and that's Star Wars to me. No matter who you are, even if you're Jar Jar, you can step up and be a hero.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know why I'm saying even if you're Jar Jar, because the same thing with Jar Jar has actually
Even if
played
you're Jar
out
Jar.
several times during the Clone Wars.
Yeah, I was about to say
Also,
this.
like,
I don't know if you caught this or like if you thought about this too, but this episode feels to me, this arc, these two feel like a sequel to Bombad Jedi.
oh, 100%. That was exactly the episode I had in mind. That is exactly the episode I would compare this to.
Yeah, because it's like kind of the same thing. Yeah.
He takes over even more in this one because in Bombad Jedi he kind of lucks out or lucks into some interesting situations. But in this,
He takes charge.
he actually knows what he's doing, which I think is cool and not something that we've seen before. He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
I
So
think
I
is
wanted to
very
bring up a
neat.
bit of trivia that I found interesting for this episode, and I just checked to make sure it was absolutely true, and it is. Did you check the who wrote this episode?
I
Both
did
of them.
not.
His name is Jonathan W. Rinsler.
Hmm.
You might
Wait a
know
minute.
of Mr.
Wait a
Jonathan
minute.
W. Rinsler because he wrote several of the behind the scenes, the making of Star Wars books. It's that Jonathan Rinsler. Unfortunately, Mr. Rinsler died last year. I think he had a stroke. I know he had a stroke. I think he might have died of a stroke or something. Let me see.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate, but it was unfortunately we knew it was coming for a little while, but he had long lobbied apparently to write a few episodes of the Clone Wars,
Good for
and
him,
they
man.
gave him these two, which he wrote. He wrote the making of Star Wars. He wrote the making of Revenge of the Sith. He wrote, he wrote the Sounds of Star Wars, the making of Empire, the making of Jedi, and he worked very closely, about. He worked very closely with Lucasfilm, and so I don't think it's very surprising to me that this arc feels like a cross between Star Wars and Jones, because those are their two most major properties. Let's go on to the next one.
All right. The Disappeared
Part 2.
2.
Wisdom is born in fools as well as wise men.
That's in
This covers something you were talking about a little earlier.
Yeah.
What are you going to say? Sorry, I remembered you.
I was gonna say I see where this is going, but I think the point of this episode of this arc is kind of almost of more of a Jar Jar is no fool, perhaps. That's what it kind of seemed like to me, to be honest.
I think if you put fool in air quotes, I think it works
Yeah,
a bit
fool
better.
kind of as a Jar Jar is known to be a fool. I see what you mean.
Is the
I see what you
supposed
mean.
fool.
He is definitely he is often an actual fool, but in here he is the supposed fool, and Mace Windu certainly underestimates him and kind of takes him for a fool. So I think you're right. I think it is more a fool in that kind of metaphorical, almost literary sense, like what Obi-Wan says,
Yeah.
who is more foolish, the fool or
The
the fool
fool or the
follows
fool
him,
who
you know?
follows him. Yeah.
Like in that sense, I understand. When you bring that up, I understand much more where this is kind of coming from.
yeah.
It's not necessarily literally, oh, you don't know what this person doesn't know what they're talking about. So yeah, I like that actually. I think that
also
is a
do-
good point.
I also do think that this episode and these episodes both serve as quite of a redemption arc for Jar Jar.
Yeah.
Because, Jar Jar was probably one of the most hated parts of the prequels. And I think this did a lot, love him or hate him, to redeem his reputation. To show that he wasn't just this clumsy Gungan who could do nothing good. That he had feelings and he had thoughts and he had desires as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Definitely.
By the way, did you notice that, what am I gonna say? We get a lot of Phantom Menace references in this episode, which I love. When Mace Windu's talking about the Force guiding him, Jar Jar goes, "Oh, Maxie beat the Force."
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
straight from Phantom Menace. And then he also, and then Mace Windu says to him later, "Do not center on your anxieties, Jar Jar."
Yeah, a lot of
As a
Phantom
reference
Menace.
to, "Don't center on your anxieties, everyone." Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
then
can't. Yeah.
also Misa did you notice Misa getting a creepin' feeling here?
Yeah.
Jar Jar has a bad feeling about this.
Yeah.
Um yeah. Uh what do you got for jumping into the episode?
I mean, once again, I had in my notes wondering why existential crisis, why do the strangest, most out of left field episodes have the most, oftentimes some of the most remarkable visuals. I did
Yeah.
notice, I'm not sure what that was about. We see one of the cultists, a Cathar, a species, holding what appears to be a loth cat in their arms. Maybe it's a Tuca cat, because I know that that is supposedly related, with the Tuca dolls, Boyle and Waxer. I think that is something. But it looks to me an awful lot like a loth cat, which I found very interesting because I was under the assumption that they had been created for rebels, but this looked almost exactly like a loth cat except blue and green rather than beige colored.
Interesting. I'm not sure if I know what you're talking about. I just looked up Cathar, the Cathar species, and apparently it says that the first appearance wasn't until in canon wasn't until the final novel in the Alphabet Squadron book trilogy of books, Victory's Price.
Maybe I'm thinking of a different species then. Maybe I said the wrong
Yeah.
name, but it's one of these. It's the same species as no, sorry, not Cather, Zygerian.
Oh,
It's a
Zygerian. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Zygerian,
yeah,
not
yeah.
Cather.
Oh, I
Not
remember that
Cather. I
now.
got
Yeah, I was about
confused.
to say
Yeah.
Cathar is Juhani from Knights of the Old
Yeah, yeah, no,
Republic.
not Cather, not Cather. But Zygerian, yeah.
Zygerian. No, I remember that too. I'm trying to remember. I think it did have some. I think it might have been a Tuca cat, but I do remember that. Yeah. It could have been a loth cat. Who knows? Um, uh, what was I gonna say? So what do you think about Talzin here?
I mean, Taliesin in this episode, it was I'm a little torn because on the one hand, oh, it is cool to see Talzin come back, have a bit of a last hurrah for her in the Clone Wars, being such an interesting character, such an influential character, one of those one of the many very intriguing recurring villains of the Clone Wars. However, excuse me. However, it did also feel a bit like, wait, you're still at this? Like you're still trying. You haven't gone into exile to try and just rebuild the last of the Night Sisters, which I mean, although that is supposedly what she is doing here, it felt a bit odd. It felt kind of like this was some desperate attempt to regain the former glory of the Night Sisters. So I don't know.
Well, first of all, it's not her last hurrah. We know it's actually not her last hurrah. Her last hurrah is something that was going to be an arc of the Clone Wars, but actually ended up being adapted into a comic series. Actually.
I meant her last hurrah in the show.
Oh yeah, and their last.
Not
That's
literally
actually.
like her last hurrah in all
Yeah.
of Star
Yeah.
Wars. Just in the show,
Yeah.
given
Yeah.
that she was such a big part of the Clone Wars often.
Yeah.
And
Actually, that's kind of why I'm conflicted about it because I know she dies very soon.
yeah. But
And I love
it's
the
interesting. You can
character.
feel the desperation that she has here. Like
Oh, absolutely.
this is not the Mother Talzin that we saw manipulating Dooku and taking on
Yeah.
Savage.
Yeah. This is not the he should never make deals with Night Sisters. Tells them this is the well shit. I gotta make
Yeah.
some kind of re-entrance into the civilized galaxy again, and I don't know how to do it. So we're gonna just try this and hope nobody notices. What
Yeah.
a Jedi noticed? Oh, it's not gonna be any big Jedi or just something like I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Who knows? Oh shoot! It's Mace Windu. Are you sure it was Mace Windu? Oh no, this is not good. um, Yeah, it's so this is interesting. Talzin hints in this episode that so the energy she's collecting from Julia to make herself more powerful is said to be from the living force. And she
Interesting that she acknowledges it as the living force because I thought that she would have been like, no, it's spirit energy. Like that's the true interpretation. So I was a little surprised by that choice.
yeah, I mean, I think she recognizes that her magic is used through the force. Or at least
Mm,
that's always been my interpretation
yeah,
of.
because it did feel a little weird to hear her talk about the living force and terminology like that, Jedi terminology, I thought, or at least
Yeah.
people who understand the Force in the mainstream conventional Jedi Sith binary sense, which clearly she has a very different take with her magics. And she actually, it's interesting that she actually sheds some light on that, saying like, oh, I'm not actually a natural Force user. I use dark magics. I'm kind of like, well, what's at a certain point, what's the difference? So it's
Yeah,
interesting.
that's my. I had a lot of those same questions, but my question was so if she doesn't use the living force, then she's only able to tap into the other part of the force, which we know as the cosmic force. I didn't know
Yeah,
someone was able to tap into one and not the other one.
yeah. I mean, if they
I
want to
just
make it a
assumed.
bigger distinction, it makes sense. Because to me, it never seemed like a cosmic force, living force, never seemed like a particularly relevant distinction, from the sense of, oh, it surrounds us, penetrates us, binds the galaxy together. It's like, oh, it's all just the force. But I guess this kind of makes it a little bit more of a relevant distinction, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I got a lot out of that, and just some interesting questions about that. I don't know if you thought about this too, but this arc, the entire arc, reminded me a lot of Jedi Fallen Order, with a lot of these ancient relics and guardians and all that kind of. The Stone Guardians remind me a lot of the Temple Guardians from Jedi Fallen Order on Zepho.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
100%.
and I love that. I will
Yeah.
also just say this. This is cool. Did you notice that Talzin, the rumble, that the voice modifications they made to her when she speaks? Do you notice they were weaker than
Yeah.
usual?
I was expecting them to not be present at all, given that she wasn't on Dathomir, because I thought
Well,
the
she
entire
goes to other
idea.
planets and they're still present though.
Yeah,
Like she goes to I think Sereno and they're still present
yeah. I mean, it's
there.
interesting because my understanding was that the Night Sisters' powers and their connection to the Force, or what they see as the magics, my understanding was that was kind of predicated on their proximity to Dathomir, but maybe that is just legends.
Yeah, I can see why you think that, and I'm not sure you're not. I'm not sure you're wrong about that. My thing was like the low voice rumble and the inconsistent voice rumble for me signified that she was losing her powers. That you know
Yeah,
that she is that she doesn't have enough power to be as intimidating as she once was, and so the rumble is like not with her every word, it's with her every like it just kind of accompanies her sentences and it doesn't like transform as much, I guess. I don't know. I love Talzin in this, and I
yeah,
think she's really interesting, and and I just feel like I want to see her more because every appearance we get, I just want more of her to see what she's about.
yeah. Definitely a
Um,
He's definitely an enigma.
yeah.
And
Uh,
but yeah, I mean, getting on to I guess the climax of this episode, where Jar Jar Binks kind of becomes a an all-star
Yeah.
for a moment. He really steps up. What do you make of that? Because I thought it was quite exciting, and I really liked when throughout this episode, he's giving speeches to the council. He's saying like, oh, don't worry about it. We're gonna do this, yada yada. Like I was thoroughly impressed. I was like, wow, this Jar Jar guy, maybe he's
Yeah.
maybe he's more than he's cracked up to be, you know? So
You
I
know,
quite like that they gave his character a little bit of a different dimension.
I did too. I think I might have watched the duel from this episode, the end of the end duel between Windu and Talzin, before I actually watched the full episode. Believe it or not,
Mm.
I think I found like a clip of it on
I
YouTube or
may have
something,
as
and I
well. It's
watched
one
it.
it's one that definitely makes the rounds on
Yeah,
the
it's a
YouTube
great
clips.
one. It's frankly it's a great one. And the beginning of the duel, uh, Frangawl cultist goes, "The Jedi are here," and Mace Windu goes, "You mean the Jedi and the Gungan?"
Yeah, that
Um,
was for
and
me, that was the moment
and
where it was like, oh man, Jar Jar's about it.
and like and when I saw that for the first time, I'm like, that's a weird little bit of a weird line. But it's a cartoon. It's a cartoony line. But now watching it like fully, like in a row with like that, and getting all that development, it's not. It's no longer a well, but technically line. It's a you forgot a very important part of this equation line. Like
Yeah,
that's it's a line acknowledging Jar Jar's importance in a way that it's a really validating feeling to see Jar Jar get the credit, and then he blasts those people away with the what weapon is that? The weird
the
gun.
crazy laser gun, crazy laser beam gun.
Yeah,
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 I know. I thought it
and
was pretty good. I
it was
enjoyed it.
great. And that's it's a really nice finishing of that arc for Jar Jar and Mace as well. Um, no, I love the Windu Talzin duel. I think that's one of the most underrated duels in the show.
Yeah,
Um,
100%. It hit hard. It hit hard in all the right ways. I thought I was not really expecting much, and it wasn't really a crazy involved duel, but
no, it
it did
wasn't.
what
But
it did
like,
what it had to do.
yeah,
Did what it had to do.
for those of you who are big Galaxy of Heroes players like Jacob and I are, you'll recognize Spirit Blade Assault, which is her second special ability in this episode.
Yes, I was saying that that comes straight from this episode. Straight
Yep.
from this episode. That was quite cool to see.
You could also argue that her basic ability, Icar Lightning, also comes from this episode.
Yeah, I think it does as well.
Um,
Because where else do we see
uh,
that? Her
I
her her
mean,
third ability comes from the
second
second
ability.
ability, the Grievous ability, the episode where Grievous attacks. I think
Yeah, I know.
Talzin really a bit of random bit of Galaxy of Heroes unashamed hashtag mobile gaming talk. Mother Talzin, she's one of the one characters whose abilities in that game are really really tied into how she actually looks when she's doing her thing
Yeah.
in her show or her movie.
To
But anyway,
to go up on a bit of a Galaxy of Heroes tangent, Mother Talzin is one of those characters that I don't care if she's gear 10 or if she's gear like I don't care if she's gear 7 or if she's relic 5. I get that like I get a little wheel turning in my head. I'm like, "Oh, be careful. You don't want that plague.
it's
You
that
don't want that plague on you."
that plague.
That plague though.
That's just like Mother Talzin in the
Yeah.
show. You never know when she's gonna be lurking in the
Just
wings,
popping back up again. Yeah.
just ready to stir the pot. Just ready
Um
to stir the pot.
Did you notice that once Talzin is defeated, it suddenly goes from night to day on the planet?
Yes, I did notice that. Very cool detail. I thought I really like that. Just one of the many moments in this episode where I was just like, wow, for a pretty for an episode that is pretty unabashedly a side quest, a bit of a side story. The attention to detail is really fantastic, and it really just
It's
shows
great.
how far the show came in its time. So props to the
Yeah.
Clone Wars for that one. Major props.
So here's my hot take about this arc. Okay. These are, I guess, in conjunction with some of my closing thoughts. Is that okay if we go to closing thoughts?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I think this arc deserved an extra episode. Actually,
You think so?
I do. I think there were a few things in I love this arc, but there were like so many things that I'm like, oh, I want to know more about that. And there's like, not in a bad way. I just like they introduce this whole new culture of the Bardotans, and we spend like 5 minutes with them. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I want to know about how they operate. And then they introduce the Frangawl cult, and we see a lot of their operations. And I'm like, I want to know where they come from. And then they introduce Talzin backing, and I'm like, I want to know what she's been up to this entire time.
Yeah.
And I really feel like an extra episode could have really fleshed that out.
Yeah. I think personally, I thought 2 episodes was great because I thought that they really kind of it kept it from meandering too much. It was kind of I thought it was short and sweet, and it did leave me wanting a tad more. But I think that would be better than the potential alternative, which would be it dragging out and getting bogged down, which does happen in these kinds of arcs more often than the average Clone Wars arc. That being said, I do think that if they really thought it out, and if they got the beats of the story right, I do think an extra episode wouldn't have hurt. But I also thought that it didn't particularly hurt it that it was 2 episodes either, at least in my
Okay,
experience.
that's fair. Um,
But
that's
I
just a
would have
personal
loved to
thing.
see what I would have loved
Yeah.
to see what they would have done in a third with this. Really get into that Binks, the Binks Windu dynamic, which was
Yeah.
unexpected and quite honestly kind of delightful and wholesome.
It was great, and I would have placed it for me. I would have placed it in the middle. I would have had the part one be part one, and the part two we got be part three, and then have a little more exploring in between.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. What do you think overall about this?
Overall, I think I would say it was I was not expecting to like it as much as I did. I definitely thought that although the Clone Wars definitely does a great job with a lot of its big heavy hitting moments, that we've had quite a lot of recently, the Ahsoka arc, the Fives arc, things of that nature. I do think that the Clone Wars also shines when it is able to kind of release the pressure a little bit and just do something different, let some of the characters breathe a little bit more, let these personalities just kind of bounce off each other without some massive galaxy changing fateful event that's dictating the flow of the story. So I found it quite enjoyable, and I definitely thought it was a breath of fresh air. So maybe it's not such a head scratcher, the placement after all, because I thought it had a good balance of, having a little bit more levity, but also still feeling like, oh, there could be some consequences here.
I absolutely agree with a lot of what you said. As I mentioned before, this is Star Wars that really hits me the right way. That I'm like, yeah, I really dig this. Like, it's goofy as all hell. Sure, I'm willing to accept that, but it's fun. It provides some new interesting context about a new interesting Force using culture. I mean, we're just checking boxes of what I like about Star Wars at this point. But let's get in. Let's get into everybody's favorite part of Star Wars in a Galaxy. What you've brought me today is worth 1/4 portion. That's right. We got 1/4 portion. Where we do a little something different. We got Star Wars opinions today. We ask each other each Star Wars opinion based questions. Jacob, why don't you start us off?
All right. Kicking us off. What piece of Star Wars content would be the most mind blowing for people if you were to somehow travel back in time to, let's say, 1999 and show it to people?
99. Pre
99.
Phantom. Pre-Menace.
Pre-Phantom.
Pre-Menace.
Yeah, well, let's say like right before Phantom,
Pre-Menace.
like the special editions are dropping in theaters this time.
Okay.
The resurgence, let's call it.
That's a really good question. I mean, I always go for this kind of thing with Massacre. The Clone Wars episode
Mm,
Massacre.
why that episode specifically?
It's nuts. They've never seen an army of droids before in 1999, pre-Phantom Menace. They've never seen these Night Sisters before. Depending on if they've seen the trailers, they might have seen someone that looks a little bit like Darth Maul. But like, Massacre's crazy when you don't have the context. Like, it's
100%.
nuts.
It is absolutely nuts. Yeah. So I totally see why that's a great pick.
Yeah. What would your
Yeah.
choice be?
Mm, that's tough because I didn't think about this, but I would probably say A World Between Worlds just because of how many things that touches on, and also it's pretty mind-boggling even even in 2018 when it came out, and even today in 2022. So one can only imagine, you know, before all the different story elements, before we're used to just how zany it can get, you know? So that'd be my
Yeah,
pick.
absolutely. I agree with that. You want me to ask the first question?
Go for it.
Okay, let's go. So we recently got news from EA Respawn, who is the studio that produced Jedi Fallen Order, that they're in the midst of making 3 new Star Wars games. One of which is the next in the Jedi saga at following Jedi Fallen Order. What do you want to see in the Fallen Order sequel?
I want to see in the Fallen Order sequel. That is a good question. I think I would want to see I would want to see more of the non-force using perspectives on the Jedi in a post-Jedi era, in an era where the Jedi are already shrouded in mystery before Order 66, but after, between the fact that A, there hardly are any Jedi, and B, the Empire is basically trying to convince everyone that they never even existed in the first place, or that they're semi mythical. How does that filter through to the average Imperial citizen? How do we see that in people who are maybe a little bit more pro Empire, maybe people who are a little bit more skeptical, maybe people who are full on against the Empire, you know? I think that'd be cool.
That would be very cool. I absolutely, and we're in the era to do it. We're Fallen Order was 5 years after Sith, and we're definitely in the era to do that. And I'm very excited to see whatever they bring. My pick. Here's my absolutely. This is off the wall. This is like tinfoil hat speculation. Probably not going to happen, but I'm gonna pitch it to you. Okay.
Okay.
Clone Force 99. I want to
Ooh.
see the Bad Batch in Fallen Order 2. Would that confirm they all survived the show at least 5 years? Yes. Do I care? Not really. I want to see all of them. I want to see Omega. I want to see Hunter and Tech and Wrecker and Echo. And I want to see how Cal and Marin and Seer and Grease interact with the Bad Batch.
That would be very interesting. That would be very
Yeah.
interesting. All right. Second question. What is the most underrated Star Wars species?
Good question. Good question. Good question. I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna say the Mon Calamari. Especially because of the arc they got in season 4 that I love so much. Mon Calamari are really cool, and they don't get enough attention. They make some of the best cruisers in the galaxy. Those Nebulon B frigates are pretty sweet. Uh, and yeah, I think the Mon Calamari.
All right.
What do you
My
think?
pick would be my pick would have to be the Ithorians. They're such a cool
Oh yeah.
species, and they just don't get any opportunity to do anything cool
What,
in
you don't
Star
like
Wars.
Doobie Doof blah blah?
Even when we added Ithorian bounty hunter, they immediately died in the Clone
Oh, what's
Wars.
his name? Anka.
Yeah, yeah,
At least, well, one of them died. I think
yeah.
the
One
other
of
one
them.
did too. Actually,
Yeah,
whoops.
they got their hat
Um,
taken. It wasn't a pretty
it
sight.
was a nice hat. Okay.
Yeah.
Um. Okay. What is your favorite? Who is your favorite obscure Jedi? So, like, you can't pick, your Anakin's, your Obi Wan's, your Ahsoka's, your Windu's, your Yoda's. But like, like I'm thinking like Kiadi, I'm thinking Plo, I'm thinking Kit
Mm,
Fisto, I'm thinking of
mm,
all those people, the Shaktis of the world,
yeah.
the Luminars.
I'm gonna go with I'm gonna go with someone really obscure. I'm gonna go with Oppo Sisis. Who wouldn't
Oh,
love to
good
be
pick.
who wouldn't love to be a bearded snake? How great is that?
You know what the actual name of the species is? My favorite part is not that he's a bearded snake. My favorite part is that he's a Thespiosian.
Pretty great, right?
I mean, that's a great name. Um, I, I'm a big fan of Fisto. Not gonna lie to you. But I'm gonna choose someone different. Yeah, I gotta do it. I'm gonna pick. I'm gonna pick Quinlan Voss. I want to know more about Quinlan Voss. I really like Quinlan Voss, and I love him in Hunt for Zero. I love that we get a brief appearance from him in Phantom Menace, and they expanded that to be an entire character both in Legends and canon. I want to see more Quinlan Voss.
Yeah, I would love to see
Um,
Quinlan Voss as well.
yeah. I think that's it. Then that is going to be it for this episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Watching all Star Wars we can get our hands on. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, follow us on Twitter at In a Galaxy Pod, Instagram at Star Wars in a Galaxy. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Anywhere you listen to your podcasts, we will be there. If we're not, you can email us at slwinagalaxy@gmail.com. Next week, Jacob and I are going to be looking at the final 4 episodes of Star Wars The Clone Wars Season 6. That includes the Lost one, and then what I call the Yoda and the Force arc. Voices, Destiny, and Sacrifice. I'm very excited to get into all 4 of those. They're going to be so fun. But in the meantime, may the Force be with you. Always.